Hey everybody, back to do another video as I'm walking. Got a ride today, but he gets off like work 30 minutes later than me, so I'll have to wait. This is a UFC 205 post video. Would have done one yesterday, but busy day, a lot of football. CFL playoffs, if you're not familiar. Ticats lost, which is my team. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers lost, which was the team I was cheering for in the other one, although don't tell Byron, because he's a BC Lion fan. Anyways, talking about mostly the Connor thing, but we're going to touch on all three title fights plus the Miesha Tate retirement. Let's start with the Miesha Tate retirement. Makes sense. She's not seen to be the most motivated fighter when it's not a title fight. And even that last title fight with Amanda Nunes that she lost wasn't all that good. So, in terms of motivation, not just like the quality of the fight or her loss or whatever, but I don't know, just the way that she came out, the energy she exuded, the body language, etc. All these things were unimpressive, and losing to Raquel Pennington does really, not to insult Rocky Pennington, who's a good fighter and a really difficult matchup for anyone, but when I'm thinking like who's a future champion or whatever, it's not her. And with Tate losing that one, it's pretty hard to really get excited to see her fight. It's kind of like a lot of title contenders. A lot of them tend to stay around way too long. And this is perhaps a good time to go out. Although maybe on a win would have been better, I guess. But if you can't beat Pennington, I'm not sure who you can match her up against. Just because stylistically speaking, like, that was a really favorable style matchup for her, and she still couldn't get that done. So, what not, like, bottom of the barrel bantamweight could you put her up against and, like, have the fight mean anything? So, that is that. Moving on, title fight number one was the ladies strawweight fight. I will say that the more I see of Joanna and Jacek, the more I see like ways to possibly capitalize on her small weaknesses. It's just I don't know what fighter in the division right now would be able to do it. You know, at range, she's a fantastic striker. In close, she's very good offensively, although somewhat suspect clinch defense. But who's going to absorb the punishment from her to get that done? Her takedown defense is super solid, and the division doesn't have a lot of particularly great wrestlers in it. So the idea of getting the striker to the ground is somewhat minimal. Her cardio is really quite good. I think her time at American Top Team will shore up some of those defensive weaknesses I was just talking about. And she's becoming very difficult. One of the more, you know, we're back in that day with your John Jones's, Anderson Silva's, GSPs, where you're trying to figure out, less so Anderson Silva, because I think everyone always suspected Anderson Silva would be somewhat prone to being out-wrestled, whereas the other people I just listed there, it's like, no idea how to beat this person, and kind of the same thing here. So, yeah, it was a good fight, it was an exciting fight, but it was one that there was never really any doubt, aside from that one big right hand that, I think it was a right hand, that Carolina landed that had Joanna hurt. And when she could not finish her off of that, kind of went back to the whole, this is an obvious answer. Tyron Woodley versus Steve Wonderboy Thompson, first on the scoring. I did score that a draw, but a different scoring. I scored it a 48-48 draw at the second round, a 10-10. And they went with the 10-8, presumably fourth round for Woodley, which I didn't particularly agree with. The way I scored it is I had Woodley winning the first and the fourth, Thompson winning the third and the fifth, and then the draw on the second. Because in the second, the shots landed was very, very equal. I could possibly get a different idea if I were to watch it again. But at the time, you know, watching it live, the shots were pretty equal, and there wasn't significant damage to speak of. that really brought up the whole thing. So that was, I think, a contentious round. Now, you could score that for Woodley and give Woodley the win. You could score that for Thompson and give Thompson the win. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the 10-8 round, I don't know. I mean, when you look at like other rounds that have not been scored 10-8 in the history of the UFC, and I mean even like recent history when 10-8s have started to become a thing finally, they're still a hell of a lot more dominant than that was. They're like usually 5 rounds of getting butchered. There were like a solid chunk of that round was controlled by Wonder Boy though. Yes, he got hurt. Yes, he got caught in the guillotine. Yes, that was a more dominant round than the first round that I scored for Woodley, but just the way they've been giving out 10-8s historically, that wasn't a 10-8 in my opinion. That's just me. Probably do the rematch on that, although it will hurt not to see Demian Maia get a style shot because his time I think is running out. And I think a title shot should be there. I think it's been earned. I think the win streak speaks for itself. I think the fact that he's really kind of cleaned up the division, along with Wonder Boy Thompson, you should do something. But I mean, at the same time, I would not want to deny Wonder Boy Thompson his rematch. Moving on to the final fight of the night, Conor McGregor, Eddie Alvarez. Because someone put away my tinfoil hat. I was talking to someone who had like some theories about this being a rigged fight, and you know what? He made a lot of points, but we're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore that for the purposes of this video. Conor McGregor went out there and looked fantastic, dropping Eddie Alvarez, I believe, 4 or 5 times, eventually finishing him in the second round. It wasn't all that different from what I thought, although I thought Alvarez would have more for him. That being said, I don't know if I've been convinced that he's going to beat other 155 fighters. Just looking at Tony Ferguson and Habib, I think there's a lot of things that both of those guys can do that could result in a bad result for Conor. And I don't know. I would probably pick both of them. I would really like to see the Ferguson fight. I think Ferguson, a longer fighter, a offensively very creative fighter, a very durable fighter in the sense that he doesn't get hurt easily. It's kind of the opposite of Alvarez, who's like this really, really good recuperation guy, but very easy to hurt. And I said that in my breakdown. I think that plays right into Conor's strengths. He's not going to give you that recuperation time, so you need someone who can't really hurt. And despite having, relatively poor striking defense for an elite level fighter, something that I think is the exploitable thing on Ferguson, he doesn't really get hurt much. His cardio is fantastic. He pushes a much meaner pace. He's longer. He's got dangerous wrestling, which we tend to forget. And he's got dangerous submissions. And that's probably a nightmare matchup for Conor. If Conor can win that fight, he'll start to win me over at that point. I think Habib is also interesting, although Habib is very, very, very hittable. And that's probably a bad thing for Conor, or for him against Conor, because at some point, despite the fact that I absolutely think he can take down Conor McGregor, he's going to get hit. And the timing Conor has is a lot better than Michael Johnson's. Still, it's an interesting fight. As for the 2-weight title thing, people are like, let him hold the titles, whatever. I'm not a fan of this because if you look at this from a business standpoint, I'm not even going to tackle this from a sporting standpoint where I think it's kind of bullshit that a title that is never defended is going to be held. Effectively, there will be no featherweight title because Conor holds it and probably will never fight a featherweight again. But let's assume, even for argument purposes, that Conor is willing to fight at 145 again and give whoever it be, Max Holloway or Aldo in a rematch, Mendez in a rematch, give Frankie Edgar a shot, whatever the case may be, down the road. You still have 2 titles on one guy. He'd have to fight 4 times a year to make that work, but I don't think he will. I'm like, that's pretty conservative. From a business standpoint, the UFC has a hard enough time hyping fighters and main events with a title, never mind having one title effectively not exist, because basically Conor's only going to fight, basically let's say 1.5 champions worth. I mean, if he defends the title twice at lightweight and twice at featherweight, sure, but I don't think that's really genuine. I don't think it's really a possibility. I don't really know if you get the best Conor McGregor with them constantly doing the hopping of weight classes like that. So I would say, I mean, he's talking about it would lessen his achievement if he were to relinquish a title, being the first one to hold 2 titles. Problem is are you ever going to defend your 145-pound title? And if so, go do it. Go fight. I mean, Aldo would be the title contender, or, you know, Holloway if you wanted to go that route. I'd say Aldo, though, being the interim champion and everything. Go do that fight, like, pronto. Don't, like, he's talking about taking a year off. I'm like, he's going to take 2 UFC titles with him on the year off? Like, does no one understand the business problem with that? You know, the title is the one prop they have. They struggle to use it sometimes. Taking 2 away, it's a huge deal. And then from a sporting standpoint, he hasn't defended that title. At some point, there's a mandatory, like, he needs to defend that title or vacate that title. So, that's my opinion on it. I know there are some Conor fans who probably don't watch me at this point because I bash Conor fans all the time. I find that I bash Conor less than I bash his fans. But I'm sorry, his fans are sometimes delusional with some of the things that they believe because Conor said it, and have no regard for anyone else's opinion or any of the backdrop of the sport. So there you go. Have a good one, and hopefully the sound quality wasn't too terrible.